Okay, Brett, just tell us a bit about how you came to the Beaumaris Football Club and appointed as coach.
My playing career was from Mentone. A couple of guys who I got involved with recruiting at Mentone, Sean Hanrahan and Phil Thomas, had moved on to Bowie and played good senior football up there, and they were putting a couple of words, I think, to the coaching panel who were looking for a new coach, and so I went up, was interviewed, and I think Ronnie Nico, Mickey Mack, interviewed me, and I think the president gave me the final tick off. So it was my first non-playing coaching role. I'd coached Mentone back in as a playing coach back in 1987. So it's about 10 years from that. So first senior non-playing coaching role.
So, when were you appointed? Was it sort of late '96, early '97, or?
It was late '96, so we got a pretty good pre-season together. I think I inherited a pretty good list. Gary Nico had them finish fourth the year before, and they'd had a little bit of bad luck coming into the finals, and lost the first semi on a wet deck. And we put in a pretty good pre-season. It was a really good balanced team. We had, I think, 7 or 8 blokes who were 27 and older, so an older group of core players. We had 7 or 8 blokes in that 22 to 26 bracket, and we had, 7 or 8 blokes, good players in the under 21 bracket. So it was a really good mixture of players.
Okay. So, 1997 kicks off. How did the season pan out for you?
1997 kicked off. We were playing Caulfield, who won the finals, I think, in the year before up at Caulfield. It was meant to be the game of the round. We were in front with about 10 seconds to go, and we made a mistake down on the back line. They put through the goal, and we lost the first game. Now, if I'd have known that Caulfield had been relegated at the end of the season, I probably would have slashed my wrist at that stage, because I thought we'd prepared really well for this game, and we were a bit disappointed. But as the year panned out, we had a group of players who were what I'd call fiercely, they didn't like losing, and they really, a good experienced group of players led by Andy Easton, people like Sean Hanrahan, Phil Thomas, Paul McManus, Adam Robury. All of these guys were experienced footballers. They'd been in the amateurs now. This is their third year in the amateurs, and they really didn't like losing. It was a refusal to be beaten. We actually won a number of games coming from behind, holding on by a couple of points. I think Old Essendon out at Old Essendon was one that stood in mind. We were a few goals down at half time. Someone punched Paul Sherman right on the half-time siren. We came out and kicked, I think, 7 goals in the third quarter, and then held into a 4-goal breeze in the last. Salesians both times, we won by a point and 2 points. It was probably a half a dozen games, Parkside at Parkside, Thomastown at Thomastown, where we just refused to be beaten in games, which was a really good thing for me. That was one of the key elements of this group of players. They were just hungry for success. They were quite physical. The second thing was that we picked up a recruit called Aaron Salisbury halfway through the year. We were going to be a good side. We were going to be a finals team. Aaron, though, was what I'd call the icing on the cake there. His background was cycling. He'd been a good cyclist, junior cyclist, and hadn't played footy for 3 or 4 years. We picked him up before we played Caulfield the second time. He kicked 5 goals in his first game. And the impact that Aaron had on the side was he just could win a game of football in a burst of 10 or 15 minutes. Very good player. And I just went back and had a look, and at the halfway mark of the season, we were 2 games plus percentage in third spot. So from the time we picked up Aaron, we won, I think, the next 8 or 9 straight, including, and that was the difference. We ended up finishing second spot. But the third probably element that defined that season is Old Geelong Football Club, who we ended up playing in the grand final. Old Geelong were coached by Mark Neal, the current Melbourne coach, and he had another 2 or 3 ex-AFL footballers playing as you do in D-grade amateurs, for no money of course. And the first time we played them was in round 8, and I think we were a goal down at 3/4 time. They might have kicked 9 or 10 in the last quarter, and it really smashed us. And we thought, it was one of those ones where you thought, I think we can beat them, but it'll probably only be in one game in the grand final, and we were due to play them in round 17, probably the second semi in the grand final. And we got to round 17, we were travelling pretty well. Aaron Salisbury had his wisdom teeth taken out and said he probably wouldn't be playing the game, so I sort of had 2 speeches for this game in the back pocket. One, we were going to have a real dip at the game, and the other one is whether or not we just keep our best, our powder dry for a grand final. And Aaron said pick him, and we'll see how he is on the day. So we got there, he said he was right to play. We walked into the rooms, it was electric in the room, so the old draw line, the sand speech came out where we said that we're going to beat them today, we're going to beat them in the second semi, and we'll beat them in the grand final. They're not going to, they're not going to do us. And coming off a quarter where I think they kicked 10 goals to 1, the last time they played us, the first quarter we kicked 7-2 to 2 points. Aaron Salisbury kicked, I think, 4 or 5 in the first quarter and had a hot hand in every score that we had for the quarter. Old Geelong were running around with 3 players on him, didn't know who he was there, so we won that game. We came to him in the second semi-final. We'd probably worked really hard to work them out. We had a guy go and videotape them 4 or 5 games. He'd say that he was learning for the ABC camera crew. He'd walk into the huddles, film the huddles for us, did they mind, and everything like that. So we sort of worked out their game. Phil Thomas, who was out injured, I sent him, he's a very good tactical thinker, sent him to watch them a few times. He came back with reams of notes. So we actually worked out their game plan, their game style. We got to the second semi out at Marchant, and I think there was a point in it at 3/4 time, and I think we kicked 9 in the last quarter to 1 goal. We won easily, and I think Aaron Salisbury kicked 8 for that game. So they were the 3 things I remember were the hunger of the side, the recruiting of Aaron in the halfway mark of the season, and also that we had a benchmark to use in Old Geelong who were really determined to beat.
And was Aaron drafted after that season, or?
Aaron was an interesting story. That was D-grade amateurs, and so we had Ronnie Nico had organised with St Kilda to give him a run, and he trained with St Kilda, and he was playing the last practice game down at Sandringham with St Kilda seniors for the next season. And I got down there with the 5-minute mark of the first quarter, and I said, "Where's Aaron?" They said he's off with an ankle injury. He'd strained all his ligaments in his ankle, so St Kilda didn't want to touch him. We then spoke to North Melbourne, their recruiting officer, Neville Stibbard, and I distinctly remember it. I said, "I've got a tape of him. He was coming down to pick up," I'd explained a lot about Aaron, his D-grade amateurs, and he'd scored, I think, 50-odd goals in 9 or 10 games. And he said, he rang me on Australia Day, I remember it was about 7:30 a.m. in the morning, and he said, I said, "You're coming down for the tape?" He said, "Don't worry about the tape, we're going to take him on the rookies list anyway. I've spoken to Dennis Pagan, he sounds like the one we need." I think Aaron's one of the 2 players at Beaumont. I think it was very stiff not to play league football. He had a season at North. Next year they were going to take him and Dennis Pagan's son as the 2 ones they were going to promote up. Dennis Pagan's son got promoted up. Aaron missed out, went to Collingwood, where he spent another year there on the rookies list. I later spoke to David King, and at a couple of footy clinics I used to do, Kevin Sheedy footy clinics, David King and also Nathan Buckley at those ones, and both of them said Aaron was extremely unlucky not to be playing.
So that'd have been 98 and 99.
98, 99, yeah.
Second question I had was 3 years in from coming from Southeast Suburban, was there some sense still then about, well, you guys are interlopers into the amateurs? I sense there probably was in 95 the first year, but was there any sort of us and them type?
I certainly felt there was. I thought there were how could I put it, tribunal decisions, administrative decisions, which I'd see that would favour old boy teams ahead of us, and just they were only little things that we felt during that season. For example, Old Geelong had choice of the rooms in the second semi because they finished on top. We beat them, came to the grand final. Old Geelong still got choice of the rooms, those sorts of things. On the grand final day, the amateur person in charge, asked the Bo Morris people to stop people drinking in the crowd, independent supporters over in the far side. Tribunal decisions, we felt that one of their blokes got off the tribunal during the season, and another one should have been rubbed out after the second semi for ankle tapping one of our players. I certainly felt there was still an old boys versus the suburbanites.
Some might argue that nothing's changed.
Yeah.
Recent events. Okay, so the grand final, 1997.
Yeah, it was okay, ask that question again.
Grand final in 1997.
Yeah, look, went into the game reasonably confident. The only parts, there was a couple of things though that were worrying me at this particular point in time. One was, having played them twice in the last 3 weeks, they should have learnt more about us than we know about them. The second part was, in those days, it was the final 4, so if you're playing the second semi, you got a week off before the second semi. Then of course you had a week off after the preliminary finals. So I had a group of players who really played one game of football in 4 weeks coming into the grand final. I was a little bit nervous about that as well. My experience from that year and from when we lost in 1998, going through winning the second semi, was generally you're a 3 to 5 goal side, worse off for not playing regular football. And the third thing that we had was a third of our side had very little football over the past 8 weeks due to injuries. There was probably Thomas, McManus, I think Rowbury, who else? Drew Johnson, David Wright. There was 6 or 7 of them had been out injured, so they hadn't had a lot of football. I'm talking really, they played 10 games between them in the last 6 to 8 weeks. So we were fortunate that the grand finals being played at Parktown, which, while still spacious, was smaller than an Elstonwick Park, smaller than the Mazenod ground. So that sort of gave me a lot of confidence. On the day, we got off to a pretty reasonable start, scrambling the first quarter, but we were tracking all right. They were obviously tagging Aaron on this day. The second quarter, our captain, courageous Andy Easton, got a shoulder injury and he got taken off, so that would effectively put us another guy down with a number of injured players. I think the 2 I had on the bench had both had jabs in the ankles to come in. I think McManus and Thomas had jabs in the ankles. We came out and played a really strong third quarter and got out to a great break at 3/4 time, a comfortable break. I think it was 24, 25 points, somewhere in that margin there. But in the back of my mind was this fitness thing. And sure enough, Old Geelong started to come home strongly in the last quarter, and they were doing a lot of the attacking, or most of the attacking. And it got to, we were just holding on. It was, we got to that that point with about 5 minutes to go. I think they narrowed the margin to 8 points and were attacking down the wing. We managed to defend it, got a kick in, and just as the bloke got rid of the ball, Mark Neal came on and laid a late shepherd, you might say, on him. The whistle got blown. Mark, unfortunately for him, got sent off. The kick got put downfield to Podgy O'Reilly, our good full forward, and he slotted it through, which put us up with 14 points with a couple of minutes on the clock, which were able to hold out. But it was, Sean Hanran, 5 goals for the game, just a super performance from our vice-captain. A young kid called Jared Wadham probably played his best game for the season. And you've got to give credit to the support staff. Slim Whitler had suggested, being a young player, to keep him away from the grandstand side, and so we played him all day on a wing out the far side where he kicked a couple of goals. Steve Reedy, our ruckman, probably played his best game of football for the club. An interesting character called Quentin Groves, who, a young fellow we put down on fullback onto their Wellsbury, who'd kicked 90 odd goals for the season, held him to a couple of goals. So we looked, it was a pretty, it wasn't our best footy. They'd certainly tagged Aaron Salisbury and worked him out. I think Aaron kicked 1, maybe 2 in the grand final. So I think all in all, though, when you reflect on the one game in 4 weeks, the number of players who were short of a run, and the fact that they had more to learn about us, I think it was a pretty courageous effort. And sort of, and that was symbolic of, I think, the season. We were desperate to hang on. You go through, some of the players that were in that side, blokes like Mahmood, Riley, Hanrahan, Warren Mills, Aaron Salisbury. They're all capable of kicking 5 or 6 goals in a game of football. So we had a good balance in attack. Steve Reedy in the ruck, Matty Quinn, Phil Thomas, Jared Wadham, Simon Fairbanks, Jude Johnson. They're all very solid footballers. They're great, and the back line, Andy Easton, just probably one of the most courageous footballers I've ever seen. Just put his head down over the ball. Paul McManus hated losing. Paul was one of these fellas who'd get the record on a Thursday night, flick through it, see the opposition had their annual ball on that night that we were playing, and he'd make a point of informing the boys. I think our record was 5 games against opposition with their annual balls on for 5 wins. So he used to take great enjoyment out of that. Adam Robury, very strong footballer. Adam Catlin had come into the side, 17-year-old, and gave us some pace. Murray Pitts was an under-19 player playing his first year of senior football, and you can see just then that he was going to be a terrific footballer. David Wright, very experienced footballer. But I think the thing that probably also stands out for me is some of the, you don't win grand finals unless you've got good depth, and it's always tough. We had some blokes who missed out. Johnny Taylor, club legend, 200 odd games, a couple of best and fairest. Was unfortunately couldn't squeeze him in. Benny Vaughan, who'd played most of the season and unfortunately missed a training session during the finals, so he missed the second semi and couldn't get back in. Chrissy Martin broke his jaw the second last game, I think, out at Aquinas. Marcus Hoyne, terrific footballer who played some good games for us during the year but missed out. So I think that was the other thing. We had a good depth of players that supported us. The other thing for me was just the quality of the support staff and the administration. Ronnie Nicholson was the president at that stage. And of course, I think Sid Catlin was treasurer. These sort of people the administrative side was well looked after. As a coaching panel, we had Slim Whitler, who'd unfortunately done his knee, but was a great strategic coach. Scotty Mathis, who applied for the senior job and stayed on to coach our reserves. Those two guys, I regard myself as a preparation coach. These two guys I regard as good match day coaches who complemented my skills. Mickey McNicholas, who understood the club and had a good knowledge of the player base. His brother Tommy McNicholas was the runner. Richard Edwards, the team manager. A good bunch of people who supported. And I think that's one of the things about winning premierships is that the broader club gets to take that joy out of the game. For me, that was the thing, and I think for Bo Morris too, it was a good kick along to 3 years into the amateurs, and we're heading up to C grade.
Mm. Mm. Okay, and then we move on to 98, 99, those years. You continued to coach?
Yeah. 98, we were probably... 98 was probably the best side that I've coached, but unfortunately we didn't win the premiership. We were in outstanding form all year. We lost, I think, 2 games during the year. Had a good final series, beating the Old Mentonians, but we came up against Hampton Rovers in the grand final, who we'd beaten comfortably both times during the season, but who'd, to me, who'd come alive in the final series. They were coached by Russell Barnes, who knew Elstonwick Park well from being an Ormond player and an amateur rep player, and they. The only game one of the games that we'd lost during the year was to one of the bottom sides, I think Bulleen Templestowe on a wet deck. We had a pretty young side. I guess for me, one of the learnings that I had from that year is I tried to transition our club to prepare them for B and A grade and we'd had a list previously with 7 or 8 blokes over 27, so I tried to transition a lot of younger players into the side. And one of the key things that I learned is playing on a wet deck in a grand final, you want bigger experienced bodies there for us to come through. We played, I've watched the game a couple of times and we tried our guts out on the day, but they were just up for the game. We would have played them 9 out of 10 times and won comfortably 9 out of 10 times. And they got up and beat us by 6 points, so it was a great opportunity that we missed. And, you know, the club, I think, learnt a lot from it, because I can remember after they won the preliminary final, people in the rooms that night saying, well, they can't beat us in the grand final. And it's one of those old things. On any given day, another side will get up and beat you. But for me, I don't think I coached particularly well in the lead up. I think I overtrained the players leading up. I tried to fit too many things into their routine. I changed what had worked well for us during the previous year, which was training Saturday and Sunday in the finals. Changed that to training an extra night during the Monday night. The lead up, we went out to Elstonwick Park on a cold Monday night. I think a couple of blokes got sore hamstrings out of that training session. They were just tired, I think, going into the game, and we struck a wet deck. And just some things that, you know, I'd kept Scotty Nishu was, I kept him on the bench thinking he'd come on in the last quarter and be our fresh legs, but unfortunately for Scotty, he came on and struggled to get into the game, because and the learning for me is in grand finals you should get your players involved in the game as early as possible. There was no fault of Scotty's at all. It's a coaching error. I was still confident. We'd fought our way back from 3 or 4 goal deficit at half time, a really wet day, levelled the scores with a couple of minutes to go, and they got the last goal. It was just a real opportunity miss, and I was able to identify, I think, about 20 points, 20 different things that were 1 goal incidents that would have made a difference for us, which I think developed me as a coach and as a person. But the thing that I really feel for is a number of those guys missed their opportunity to be premiership players for Beaumaris, unfortunately. Benny Vaughan, Justin Vance, Nigel McLean, Paddy Fisher. There's probably a few others who I've forgotten, but yeah, really unfortunate.
Having said that, I mean, you've come up from D Division, you're playing in grand final for the Premiership and C Division. It's hindsight's a wonderful thing, but you think, well, it's a pretty good achievement to do that. I know
it was, and we were playing probably our football that year was as good as football. We got our game style down. We had the best attack by probably 200 points. Probably honestly, Hampton Rovers were the best defence we were second, very close to them. They won 3 finals, kicking under 10 goals. Got a wet day on every final, kicked under 10 goals, and in the grand final had 2 goal scorers for the game. So yeah, it was a good achievement. It was good for it, but I think it left a bit of a scarring on some of those players who were involved. Some of those guys just weren't the same footballers afterwards. The 98 year, we lost a lot of players. A lot of players, and we ended up getting relegated by winning 6 games, 6 or 7 games. It might have been 7 games for the season. We won 7 games and got relegated. There was only 2 teams that we didn't beat for the year, so we won 7 games against individuals, show that we were up for it. 9 games got you into the finals, so we were a bit stiff.
Did you find the standard from C up to B significantly different?
It did, but I was confident. If we had gone up with the same side that we had intact, I have no doubt we would have played finals football and given it a decent shake. I think Murray Pitts had, in those last couple of years, we'd had Aaron go over to North Melbourne and Collingwood. Murray was at St Kilda this year. A number of players had decided they'd make it the year that they'd go overseas. Overseas. So we lost a number of players, and I think Sean Hanrahan might have retired by this stage. So we're rebuilding. Personally, I think I coached as well that season as any season that we did. We did everything we could to sort of stay up. We're just stiff in the end. I haven't seen a season like it since where you beat 7 teams and 7 individual teams. So we knew we were good enough to cut it against the B grade sides, but we just couldn't get it. And unfortunately, that started our yo-yo up and down, B grade, C grade, which continued. Which has basically continued for the past 10 years, where we've got up, and it's great to see that at this stage we look like we're going to be playing our first B grade final series.
Fingers crossed. So it was 99, you finished up after that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it was time. It was, for me, work was getting just a little bit hectic. I had a young family as well, who football... I think people, I regard myself as a preparation coach, and I think the players who played on me would recognise that, and it was a lot of time. You watch videos. I think we're ahead of the game at that stage. We were getting, games taped. We were getting the stats taken. There's a lot of time and involvement into that, thinking through. For me, you'd finish that day and I'd try and have a theme ready straight after the game for the next week, which you'd work through. I'd go out and measure opposition grounds and come back, and Beaumaris being a big ground, we were able to do our training on, I'd match it up to the opposition ground if we were playing away. So sort of those things take your toll on it, and it was probably the right time for me to give it away.
Okay. And then what were the circumstances of actually coming back to the club?
Look, there's a bit of controversy, I guess, in terms of that. the club had made the finals the year before, playing against Caulfield, finished, I think they got bumped out in the first semi-final. I think John McNicholas, who's had an illustrious career and had also, I think, had an earlier stint of coaching the club, was coach, who might have been co-coach with Tim Renitz. The club thought it was time to probably have a different voice, and there was a little bit of, I think, controversy in the club around that decision there, which I understand perfectly, and Super ended up going down to one of the opposition teams and was assistant coach, which I can understand that. And Luke McNicholas, who was at the Sandy list, who I think he played his first game under me in, would have been 1997 as a 16-year-old there, and he was up on the Sandy list. And when they were having the bye, he picked the Mentone Vultures, where his dad was assistant coach, to go down and help, and I understand that. We had his brother Sean still playing at Beaumaris, the two uncles, Tommy Mack and Mickey Mack, still, I guess, watching it. So it was an interesting, added a little bit of interest, and particularly as the Vultures were coached by a former Bowie player, Tony McGeorge, son of a Beaumaris great, the late Peter McGeorge.
Okay, and so you signed on in 2003. Did you have much knowledge about the team and who?
No, look, I still knew quite a few players, but the team was. It wasn't one you'd easily categorise, to be quite honest. It wasn't one that you'd easily categorise, and we had a strong pre-season. My basic coaching philosophy was to try and fit in a half a dozen runs before Christmas, get us to a reasonable standard of fitness, give the players a 6-week break. I'd bring them back after the Australia Day weekend, give them a 6-week break where they knew they had to be at a certain standard of fitness, and we got back. We were having a very good pre-season when, unfortunately, a really tragic event occurred with the death of Damien Gwydlin, a boy from the under-19s. And, you know, I still remember it very well. I think it was Valentine's Day. A group of our players had gone into the St Kilda Festival. A number of them, some of our players and some of their girlfriends and sisters, were playing in the Victorian Beach Volleyball Championships on the day, and they'd called me and said, "Do you want to come in and have a look?" I said, being an older gentleman there, I said no. And they called me about 6 o'clock and said, "Look, we've won we won the men's and the women's. I think Craig Jury and a couple of them they'd won the beach volleyball Victorian titles, and they'd come back and was celebrating." I said, "So you're all back safely?" "Yep." And unbeknownst to me, a couple of them had stayed at the St Kilda Festival. I still remember. The next day I was on a phone conference and my mobile rang. It was John Collins, who'd just been appointed, taken over the presidency, and he said, "Gwids is on life support system. They don't give him much time." And when I was able to unjumble from the conversation, that a couple of them had stayed on, and unfortunately I allowed David Hooks, and we've seen a number of incidents since. He received a punch and hit his head on the concrete, and unfortunately was in a coma and died later that week. And it was a really a very difficult time.
Yeah.
And for young guys to see that, to know that. And it was complicated by his family was Italian, and I think there was a separate family life to the football life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the boys wanted to go and say their goodbyes, and that was made somewhat difficult. The credit to it was to John Collins, who really led the club in those next couple of weeks, and we got a psychologist in. We worked out a plan to get our players through that, and it was a big lead up, I guess, to the first game against Caulfield, and it was complicated by, there's a big build up obviously for that game, complicated by the fact that we had a relationship with Sandringham, that if players didn't get games in their two sides, they could come back and play for Beau Morris, and some of them were Beau Morris boys. Cal Buckley was one of them. And it turned out on the Thursday or the Wednesday before the first game, they said, we've got 5 players for you, which was great because they're quality footballers. But we had guys in Beau Morris who wanted to wear that black armband for Gwids in that first game, who had unfortunately had to leave out of the side. The boys, those 5 from Sandy, trained with us on the Thursday night. I remember calling them in before training and just said, look, these are the circumstances, this is the honour you've got playing in this game on the weekend. And as it turned out, we needed every one of them. It was probably the highest standard game of C-grade football that I can remember. One of the boys, he kicked 8 for us, full forward, and we got up by a couple of points on a dry day. And the next 6 weeks, we gradually reduced those players down. We won, I think, the first 6 games of the season, but Melbourne, who had the relationship with Sandringham at that time, and Sandy started to get a few injuries, so that all those blokes went back, and I could sense with that happening, our players had been emotionally up for a number of weeks, or several months. You could sense it, that we were starting to fall apart. I was hoping we'd get a win out at St Leo's this last, it was round 6 or 7, and I felt it was important because I felt if we got that one, we probably only need to win a half a dozen of the next 12 or 4 or 5 to make the finals, and we lost by a couple of points, and there was some frustration there. And the rest of the season, we won 3 of the next 9 games, so after winning the first 6 and everything was looking pretty, we won 3 of the next 9 games of football, which put us in a somewhat difficult position coming into it. And it was just a combination of reasons. We had injuries, we had that emotional low. I felt we'd gone up, built ourselves up, held it together for so long, we then dropped ourselves down. And I'm not sure, I don't think I was coaching particularly well. I was trying to use methods that I'd used from 1997, 98, 99 with a different group of players and that generation had changed. There's still a few of the guys there who I'd coached previously, but it was a different generation. And I felt there was still a switch. I was still confident that we could get ourselves back in, but it was getting gloomy. I think round 12 we lost to Ormond, who were bottom. Murray Pitts did a serious injury to his knee. And I remember losing as a coach because I cracked it against Adam Catlin after the game, and Adam had actually been on for about 20 minutes. So I'd had him, brought him on for 20 minutes during the game. I put him in the bracket, and a bit of reflective thinking. And then on Monday night we got the call to go in front the committee there, and the Godfather movies, well, if you knew the Godfather movies, well, we had Roddy, Nico, we had Gary there. And look, it was I guess a useful process, and if you remember, Sonny and the Godfather movies was the excitable one. Well, Gary Nico was the excitable one at the meeting.
Still is.
There. And that was fair enough. It was a fair cop. We'd gone from losing that, and I remember myself and the assistant coach Mickey Lovejoy. I walked out of that, and you know, we felt a little bit hard done by, but I also, and I've said this to Gary Nico at the time, I said it felt, it gave me personally the spur to work out whatever it took to get us back into there. And it was a question for me of trying to find the right switch to get these players back in. You know, that was one of them. It was probably a recognition too that my two assistants, and I was really fortunate in 2003, Mickey Lovejoy had applied for the senior coaching job with Sue Grayson, who was a fitness advisor. And Sue had a wonderful background, a former Australian Olympian marathon runner. Her former husband was Stephen Laxalt. She knew football. She'd won the up the Rialto and up the Empire State Building races twice. So she had a wonderful background, and I was very fortunate that Mick agreed to stay on as assistant coach and Sue agreed to be the fitness advisor. And for me, it was a realisation that those two probably had a better rapport with the players than necessarily what I did. I just think that they on an individual level, and for me it was a question of working out the big picture and leaving a lot of the interaction with the player group to those two. And we tried, I remember it was a frustration, we tried different things. We had them writing down, you know, 3 things, one they could do differently, one they'd stop doing, a sacrifice they'd make for teammates. And we kept trying different things and turning it around. It got to a stage, we'd get close to teams but not quite get there. And it got to round 16 and we had to go out to Therry Penola. And Therry had beaten us at home. They had a couple of blokes called the Bannister Boys. One of the brothers played at Carlton, AFL umpire, yes. And the father was the famous Wayne Bannister, Australian boxing champion there, and a couple of the boys could handle themselves, and I was actually, as a 16-year-old, a side story, but I was playing for Mentone the Seniors in a practice game against South Morang when Wayne kindly put my lights out in a game and saw stars. So, and there was a fair bit of tension involved from Therry Penola a couple of years earlier, beating Bo Morris in a grand final, another one that lost away under Jimmy Durnham when they got Danny George sent off for the whole of the game after half-time, and they played 17 men short, 1 man down for a half, and Therry Penola, there's a bit of feeling there because we got that bloke about 6 weeks, one of the blokes 6 weeks at the tribunal, but they won the grand final. And they'd actually sent a telegram to Johnny Collins, a derogatory telegram about a number of our players in the week before this game. And I was trying to work out what it was, and we decided we'd have a last ditch as a club, that we were going to go out as a group on a bus with the reserves, and we're going to go out and really have a crack, because the Vultures, who were sitting in 5th, were in 4th. They were playing the bottom side Ormond. They expected us to lose, them to win, and they'd be comfortably in the finals. They were 4% behind us, I think, at the same number of points at this stage. And we had a guy called Ben Newton who did our videos that year, a really good kid who'd do cuts for us of individual players and things like that. And Benny put together a video for this game of our highlights of the year, and presented to music by Our Sacrifice, or something by, I think it's Creed. And we came here for dinner on the Friday night. We put the tape on. We had the dinner and put the tape on, and first of all I showed them actually footage of the Beaumaris game that I'd had a look against Therry Penola when we got beat, and in that game there was actually a number of times where Therry Penola players pulled out of contests, which I hadn't realised till I watched the video a second game. So I was able to show our guys that these guys who were the big tough guys actually pulled out of contests in that game against us. And we put the videotape on and there was just silence. And then someone said, "Can we watch it again?" And I thought, oh well, that's good, we're not in the right mood. And we caught a bus out, we had the rolls and everything, and the bloke on the bus had a thing, so we watched the game before the game on the bus there. We got out to Therry Penola, we picked, Murray Pitts put his hand up, he hadn't played since for 4 or 5 weeks with the knee, his knee was bugged, he said, "I'm playing." I think we picked Justin Bryce for this game, who hadn't been able to get in because of his hamstring injuries. We picked the 2 Atkins boys. We decided this was it, we're going to roll the dice with these blokes, and if they broke down, they broke down, but we did it. I later watched the ball got bounced, and in 15 seconds it didn't leave the centre circle there. I later watched on the video, and I think we recorded 12 tackles in that 15 seconds, and the ball didn't leave the centre bounce. So we won that game. We won it comfortably by, I think, 40 or 50 points. And for me, that was a really significant mental advantage, because we put doubt in the Vultures' minds. I remember walking off the ground that day, and Shawnee Mack had taken a phone call, who was played in the reserves, from someone from the Vultures who'd rung up to get the score, and obviously thinking we'd be beaten that day, and they'd beaten Norwood by 80 points or something. And I can remember he was telling him, "Nah, they've won by 50 points," and I know it put doubt in their minds. And it was then a question of, could we hold on? The next week we won by 50 points, they won by, I think, 70, 80 points. It got to the last round, we were 0.6% ahead of them. Fifth was playing third, so the Vultures were playing Caulfield. Fourth was us, and we were playing top spot, Collegians away. Both teams were playing away. If we won by 8 goals, we got the double chance. If we lost by 2 goals, we're out of the finals. So we came to that game out of Collegians, really well prepared, well drilled. At half time we were 22 points thereabouts up and playing pretty good football. Collegians had a strong second half, and unfortunately lost by a couple of goals. And we're out on the ground, and someone said the Vultures are 10 points up with about 7 minutes to go. And I actually started to address the players and saying, we've only got ourselves to blame. We're out of the finals for the first time. We'd been in the 4 all season and we're put out. And Ronnie Nico, as he does, was either at the game, we'd sent someone down, and someone's yelled out, "Hang on, Caulfield's got a goal." And another one. Vultures hit the post with a couple of minutes to go, and then another goal. Caulfield got up and won by 2 goals, which actually put us back into the finals. And it was a really strange feeling, because a lot of our guys felt they didn't deserve to be in there. But for me, it was interesting, because we went into the Collegians rooms after the games, and I sensed fear in them. They said, "You're the one team." They openly said it, and I thought, why would you say this? You're the one team we didn't want in the finals. So it was a question then of working out how to get these group of players back. And I think at that night at the club rooms when we did the speeches, I made a point of just saying, tell me why the Vultures would deserve to be in the finals when they hadn't been in there for 18 rounds. That we did. And one of the Collegians' parents was there, Rochi, who had some Bowie connections, and I made a point of saying that this was a beautiful position to be in, that we had to beat the three teams now to win the final. I said this is a fantastic spot for us to be in, because we'll know then that we are truly the best team. And that night they had an auction at Mentone RSL, and I listened to Sue Grayson get up and tell her story about how she got into football, why she was involved in football, why she ran upstairs, and why she ran marathons. And Sue's a fantastic speaker, a motivational speaker, and we were playing Caulfield in the first semi, who we'd already beaten twice during the season, and I just felt we needed something different to this group. It was like a group of a horse, if you like, those tricky race horses. Some older people might remember a horse called Hyperno, which had a lot of tricks, and you used to have to put blinkers on, blinkers off, smother it. And this was the side that you had to try and do a few things with. And I spoke to John Collins and said I'd like Sue to coach the team in the first semi-final. And John, to his credit, didn't say you're crazy or anything. He just said it's fantastic. So Sue actually did the preparation for the game and spoke about breaking a game into, you don't run out a marathon in 2 hours 10 minutes. You actually break it up into sections, and she took the boys in pre-game speeches all through the game. Mick and I sat in the box and did some of the moves, the half-time, the post-match, and the awards back. And we got up and beat Caulfield, and it was a credit to Sue and her professionalism and the respect that the players had for Sue as well. It was quite something special. And it was quite funny. I went to work the next week, and a Vultures supporter said, "Mate, what was it with the Sheila coaching the team?" I said, "That Sheila's run the Olympics and won the Empire State and knows more about football than you'll ever do, Darren." So we got through Caulfield, and John O'Holt in that game, we were a little bit fortunate. One of their blokes went down with a knee in the first minutes. John O'Holt laid out Nick Craven with a beautiful hip and shoulder. Nick had played with Bowie a couple of years earlier, and they were just switched on, very desperate, in the zone, this team. And we started to pick up some of our players. We'd had Pitsy out, we'd had Justin Bryce out, Mickey Atkins out. We got Timmy Collins back the last game. We added in Luke Healy into the preliminary side. From mid-season we added, I think, 7 players who had been out injured. This was some of the work Ronnie Buller had taken on to get our injured players back and playing. And we played St Leo's in the prelim, who we'd lost to both times. And we're at one stage in the first quarter, we're 5 goals down. And I think we went in half-time 5 up. And again, we went away and were easy 80-point winners, I think it was. And Mickey Lovejoy was primarily the coach of that day. And for me, he did a terrific job. His professionalism and respect he had from the players. So we got to the grand final. It was Collegians in the grand final, and we'd split the results 3 or 4 goals each game. And we went in with an unchanged side, which was from the preliminary final, which was good. And on the day, Ronnie Nico rang me before the game, said, "Whatever you do, kick with the breeze." In the first quarter, we're playing at Elstonwick Park, a ground that hadn't been particularly happy for Beau Morris to that stage. We liked playing our finals at Sandringham. And I said, "Why?" He said, "I've rung the Weather Bureau, Ronnie." He's contacted the Weather Bureau. At 4:10 p.m, there'll be a squall coming through. The wind will change direction, drop off altogether, and the rain will come down. And I said, "Fine." So we went to the game. We lost the toss. Collegians decided they'd kick into the breeze, and apparently it was a predetermined tactic, one for which it's interesting. To this day they maintain that we won the toss. Their reserves were playing in the grand final. They won the toss, kicked into the breeze, held the team in the first quarter, kicked 8 in the second quarter, and the game was over and they won it. So I think it was a strategy for them to play. And it was a really interesting preparation, and probably one that I changed. I was more of a, I guess, an emotional coach in terms of my previous stint. And this day we kept it simple, kept it plain. I think the boys knew they had a job to do. Some of them, unbeknownst to me at that stage, a number of them had been down to visit Damien's crypt, either during the week or before the game. They put on the red armbands for Gwids, and we came out in the first quarter with the howling gale and kicked, I think, 2 goals 6, and Collegians put 2-2 on the board into the breeze. And we had all the play, and they probably went into the forward line a couple of times and just got the goals on. So quarter time, they were cock a hoop. Their strategy was working, kicking into the breeze. Here they were going to crush us in that second quarter. I was still confident at this stage though. I felt if we could hold them for this quarter, and we just instructed our players to play the far side, bottle it up, whatever you do, just keep kicking it wide. And at half time it was 3 goals, 8 Collegians' favour to I think about 2-8 ours. So we'd held them there, and I remember looking at their faces going off, and you can see that wasn't in their script. And our guys were cock a hoop. We were in the game still, and we just discussed what we'd done wrong in the first quarters, used the wrong side of the ground, that we're going to keep it open, play the right side of the ground. I think we might have kicked 6 or 8 goals, a booming goal from Mick Atkins, Luke Healy, Blake Gillespie. We just kicked a number of goals. Then, coming into the wind in the last quarter, we kicked the first 4, which is a great feeling to have there, and right on cue, the wind dropped off, the rain came down, they scored a goal, and I think it was one of those games at the 20-minute mark I was able to come out of the coach's box and get walked to the boundary line. It was a courageous effort. These group of guys, I've got that one there. Hang on, should I just pause it?
That's all right. All right.
The group of players were just sensational for virtually 6 weeks, apart from a half of football against Collegians. These group, they're unbeatable. The quality of that win, to me, was that Collegian side, virtually intact, won a B-grade premiership, then went up and played regular A-grade finals, and I think 6 of them were still in their flag side in A-grade last year, in 2011. But, Timmy Collins played with a crook knee on a bloke called Shura Taft, who kicked 4 on him in the last game. I think he held him to goalless. Mark Ensor, just Mr. Reliable at full back. John O'Holt played with a busted hand that day, and there was no way he was going to be stopped and left out of it. He'd had it for 4 weeks. He busted his hand. Mick Atkins had come back from a knee injury and played a superb game for us across half forward and kicked a couple of good goals. Paul Sherman, centre half back, I think 35 years of age, became the first Beaumaris footballer to win 3 flags. Adam Catlin, Adam had been dropped during the season, and his form wasn't great, and he committed himself to get back into the side with great courage and became a variable part. Andrew Spence probably enjoyed his best season of football. Chrissy Martin, who'd missed out in '97, had in the win there, played in the losing '98 one, I think played in the losing 2002 one, was able to get and who had given football away at the start of that season. In 2003 there were some personal things, just played a great football. Sean Coote, I think kicked a number of goals for us and probably became of age as the senior footballer that year. Lukey Buller probably enjoyed his best year of senior football, including I think he kicked 5 in the preliminary final. Justin Bryce, big strong bodied boy who came in and made a bullocking difference for us. David Teasdale gave us great versatility. You could play him on the wing and the half forward or the half back. Matty Blackmore was just a mercurial player. Murray Pitts. And I should tell the story about Pitsy because on the Thursday, I honestly believe he gave up his career. That knee should have been operated on, and he didn't get it operated on, and I might be wrong, but he really didn't play a lot of good football after 2003. He came back and he led that side. On the Thursday night before the grand final, he was out on the training track, but he really didn't train. He just stood in the shadows, and I saw him bend over holding his knee all the time. And I went round and saw him on the Friday night, and to be honest, he was buggered in there. And I rang Sue Grayson and said, Sue, what do we do? And she said, I'll talk him through. He said, my former husband, Steve Malaxos, had played with a similar knee injury in a grand final and got through. And Murray, I think he might have kicked one goal in the final, but he took Holst, one of their best backmen, out of the play and got us through that game. It's just his leadership there, and I know he said to me afterwards he didn't have a minute left in his body to play. Mark Boone, great inside player, could take a big grab for us. Mike Michulak had a fantastic year in the ruck. Blake Gillespie, a young boy who was really hard at the football. Braden Haynes. I guess you could say, devoted his year to grit. And for me, to see him win that best on the ground was just a fantastic moment. And pointing to his armband, his red armband. Luke Healy came back in, good big man who gave us versatility. Young Ryan Rawlings, he gave us speed, and I think he kicked 4 goals in one of the finals. He was just a player who could come on and be a great burst player. And Brant Deaton, who was the son of Mickey Deaton, our under-19 coach, was just a hard-at-it young footballer. But again, we're fortunate that these group of guys just got together at the right time. The fact that they went up, and the next year I think we came straight back down, they were just determined on that day. And again, you get the unlucky ones. Nick Atkins, who played great footy for us during the year. Luke Atkins did his knee. Nick Kennedy, a lot of unlucky blokes. Jay Williams, who'd come in, an under-19 player, played the first 2 finals, it might have been, or the first final. Decided he wanted to play the under-19s finals, who were being played at the same time there. But for me, it was also a reflection again of great administration. John Collins, the president, fantastic in his first year. My support staff of Mickey Lovejoy, Mick Carney, the reserves coach, Sue Grayson, Andy Easton, the runner, our chairman of selectors, Alan Sutherland, very experienced, who was terrific. But for me, the special moments that for me, 3 things stand out about that afterwards. Was we went into a change room, just the players and the coaching staff, and we spoke about what that win had meant for each of us there in terms of it, and it was just amazing to hear the guys speak about. Going back to the club rooms and seeing so many happy parents of Beaumaris families, Collins, Catlins, Mark Ensaw's father, Dougie, who was a Noble Park, but who's been following Bowie now for a number of years, Martin, Spencer's, Coots families, Bullers, Pitts, Haynes, all good Beaumaris people, Deatons there. Just amazing to see so many happy families involved in it. And probably the third thing that we did, and it was a sense of closure for the year is before the presentation night. We took the Premiership Cup down to Gwids' crypt, and we were able to propose some toast to him, and we linked arms and sang the club song with the cup in the centre and around his crypt. And it was probably, I would say, it's the most emotional moment I think I've been involved in football, but it also enabled us to have a sense of closure, I think, in the season. Yeah, it was certainly one of those seasons where you'd swap everything to get a kid back, but you couldn't, and they did the next best thing that they could for it.
And didn't coach the next year?
No. Two things. I probably realised in some respects my time was up, but also Mick Lovejoy had showed to me that he was a senior coach there, and I really felt that the loyalty that Mick had displayed to me coming on board as assistant coach needed to be returned. And I knew my work the next year was going to be pretty busy, and it was an interesting one because and Johnny Collins will tell you this, I ummed and ahed from the grand final through to the presentation night whether I would or wouldn't do it, and it was only after we'd been down to visit Gwids that I realised that probably my job was done, it was finished, and I came back to the club rooms and told John at that point that was it. It was time to move on.
Have you coached since?
Coached lacrosse. No, I haven't coached since, so look, I've been really lucky. I had a great playing career at Mentone, who I regard as my playing career, and I've been very fortunate at Beaumaris in the 2 stints, the 4 years I've coached. We got it all. We had the 2 grand finals, 2 premierships, the beaten favourites in a grand final, which, as awful it is, makes you a better coach and a better person and a better club, and then the relegation with 7 wins. So I think that was enough for it.
It's interesting. I'm trying to turn this. Okay, Brett, you just want to tell us a bit about the win against Collegians in the 2003 final and what it meant.
I think one of the, I'm a bit like the Godfathers. They had that saying, revenge is a dish best served cold, and going back to my first stint in 97, when we were in D grade and Collegians were an A grade club there, and I distinctly remember them recruiting a couple of our players, Nick Boctor and Brooke King, who played with us in 96, and who they came down and recruited the 2 of them off. And I remember on the Thursday night before the first game, when we gave their clearances and we spoke to both players and to the Collegians representative, I remember Ronnie Nico and I were in the room, and we fronted them and wished the boys all the best as you do. But I remember both Ron and I saying that one day we would repay a favour to the Collegians Football Club. And I remember it took us a number of years, 6 years, but after that 2003 grand final, after the game, both Ronnie, Nico and I turned to us and said, remember that 97 when we said we would repay the favour to them? And we certainly did. I also just wanted to make a mention of a guy who I found of enormous assistance during both the 97, my 2 stints in Bowie Footy Club, Scotty Mathers, who coached our reserves, was part of the match committee from 97 to 99. Scotty is a footballer, had a great football brain. In 2003 he was our recruit, our forward scout. So Scotty used to go and watch the next week's opposition for us, put them all down on the notes and paper, and he was just a fantastic person to be involved in the club. One other thing in terms of that Collegians game, when we were going into it, at half time, the Collegians had won 9 out of 11 second halves that they'd played in the last 11 weeks. We'd been a dominant force in the second halves. I remember walking out at half time after we'd managed to claw our way back into the game in the second quarter. I stood 20 metres away from their huddle, and a number of their players, their captain had them in the centre, and I looked and saw half a dozen of their players looking out, not focused on the captain, but looking away from it, and I thought we might have a chance against these blokes because they just didn't have their focus on the game. And the other thing of that game is, to this day, Collegians maintain they never won the toss. I've had a number of a teammate of mine at Melbourne, Teddy Carroll, who's a Collegians supporter, come up and he consistently asked me who won the toss pre-game. I say Collegians. He said that's not the way they tell the story there, but winners are grinners.
Thanks, mate.